Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone that's watching today. We're here, blessed to spend today, this Shabbat, to be able to bring you this wonderful teachings that we put together for the body of Mashiach. And today we're going to go ahead and, Brandon is actually going to go ahead and go over a very significant teaching that has to do with Yom Kippur. Okay. Um, now, this teaching basically is going to be about the role that the bride has, in this end times that we're living in, and also how does the bride get ready? Okay, so we're going to connect that bridge in this teaching, and Brandon will bring us some wonderful information and insight. Um, and how this wedding is going to take place. So Brandon, without further ado, go ahead, brother.
Sounds
I want you
good.
to hear it.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Jose. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. All right. So, so preparing for that glorious day. Speaking of that glorious day of his return, and we're going to talk today about how we get from Shavuot to Sukkot. You know, how we get from the proposal and the acceptance all the way to the wedding feast. And we'll get more into the wedding feast next week, of course, because that's what next week is all about. But Yom Kippur this weekend is the actual wedding day itself. So in this, I'm going to use as an example my wife Stephanie and I as an example, because the Apostle Paul talks about in Ephesians 5, he talks about this is a great secret or a great mystery, but I speak concerning the Mashiach and the assembly, when he references a man and his wife, and why a husband should love his wife and give himself for her, just as Mashiach gave himself for the assembly, right? We'll get more into this. But to start off, so this is the castle. Well, it's like a house / castle. It's a house that looks like a castle, I guess you could call it, where Stephanie and I got married on July 7th of 2017. And this is actually a place that she used to go to as a child with her mom and with her sisters. And like, I didn't even know this like until we were already engaged and everything, but that she had always dreamt of getting married here. I know it never knew that. So crazy story, but I don't have time for all that. But I do want to tell you about some of the prophetic visions and dreams that I had had leading up to our wedding, because I feel it's important. So part of this was written on May 23rd, 2017, which is about 44 days before we got married. I've been having a lot of visions about our wedding day. They're very vivid in clarity and color, but there's always one area of exception: what she will look like in that dress on that glorious day. Yahweh has been speaking to me through these visions and giving me the ideas for the overall theme of the wedding. Even the theme of the wedding, hashtag much more than a wedding, came from him, because this is so much more than just a wedding. This is a picture of the good news, the gospel, the Besorah itself. He gave me the theme of here is in heaven, and then confirmed it through a set of sermon series when we were going to our local church. You know, here is in heaven on earth as it is in heaven. That's where that comes from, right? Matthew 6. But it is a picture of Yahweh's redemptive plan for his son's bride, called the marriage supper of the Lamb. No matter how many visions I have, I will never clearly see her clearly until 44 days from now, when she is revealed to me fully. And the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13:12, for now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I am known. 1 Corinthians 13:12. So if marriage is the representation of the Besora, then here are the different stages and how they correlate to one another. So I'm going to break down the stages and I'm going to go back through them. So you have the beginning of the pursuit. You have the bride price or the payment for the bride. You have the engagement, the betrothal, right? And then you have the wedding itself, like I said, the wedding day itself, which is what Yom Kippur represents. And then, of course, you have the marriage supper of the Lamb, Sukkot, ruling and reigning with him for 1,000 years, like we talked about, right? All right, so I'm going to tell you a quick story about Stephanie and I's story. So this is when James says that the prayer of a righteous man availeth much, he wasn't kidding. And because literally, so Stephanie and I had known each other for probably 7 to 8 years or something like that. We were acquaintances at a local church, and she was in a previous relationship and I was previously married. And it was never a thing of like, the grass is greener over there or anything like that. It was just a pure, actually the first time I met her, it was funny because I was with my wife at the time and she came out and gave me a big hug and I'm like, I didn't hug her. She hugged me like I'm innocent here. And it was this funny thing that happened. But, through, I ended up, leaving that church and going elsewhere. And a few months later, I found out later that, she ended that relationship and everything like that. And we began to mend on our own in 2 separate areas, right? Well, on July 31st, 2016, I was writing, and I actually have it right here. I'm not going to read it all because it'll take too much time, but I have it right here. This was my list of qualities that that a modern day Proverbs 31 woman would have in there, that she would possess. And literally the very next day, I got a text message via Facebook from my pastor's wife, my old pastor's wife, and he said, and she was telling me like, do you remember Stephanie, blah, blah, blah. And long story short is she needed a car. And I worked at a car dealership at the time, right? So she comes in, I ended up selling her a vehicle and everything like that. And in that moment, all of a sudden I saw her in a different light, and it was like scales had fallen off my eyes. And we were reacquainted or reunited, after, a couple of years or whatever. And it was literally the very next day after I prayed for a Proverbs 31 woman. I mean, literally the very next day. So a lot can happen in one day. That's all I have to say. All right. But let's get started. So the beginning of the pursuit, right? Before we become a believer, the Father sends the Ruach HaKodesh to begin whispering to our hearts and wooing us into an everlasting covenant with him. Now, I refer to this as like the scandal of grace, because once we have a taste of him, of his presence, we long to be with him more and more and more. And we long to read his word and be in his presence and worship him and fellowship with him, right? So, but also let's talk about Boaz noticing Ruth. So when we read the story of Ruth, and I would encourage you guys, I don't have time for all this, so I'm going to kind of bring some bullet points out, but go and read the story of Ruth. It's 4 chapters. That's all it is. It's 4 chapters, okay? And then go and read Song of Solomon as well, because these 2 books in the scriptures are actually representations of Mashiach and his bride, okay? These are what they are, all right? So But so Ruth notices, or Boaz notices Ruth. In Ruth chapter 2, verse 5, it says, and Boaz said to his servant who was appointed over the reapers, whose young woman is this? And in the verse 10, Ruth comes up to Boaz, and she fell on her face and bowed down to the ground and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, seeing I am a foreigner? And she said, let me find favor in your eyes, my master, because you have comforted me and have spoken to the heart of your female servant, though I am not like one of your female servants. So just like Boaz, or just like Ruth was brought to Boaz, because see, Boaz was the landowner, right? He was the landlord, if you will, over the field. You know, he's the overseer. And Ruth was brought through her mother, or through her in-law Naomi, to that field to go and work. And the same way Stephanie was brought to me, just like I just told you. I didn't go and, you know, have to search her out on, you know, some dating site or, you know, anything like that. It was that she showed up back in my life, like I said, the very next day, right? So, but the pursuit. So the word notice here is nakar. So it's to look intently at. You guys can read the rest of the decisions. Now, one thing I want to point out is that it's funny when a man, you know, has a crush, or, you know, is attracted to a woman, you know, he begins to act strangely, right? Like, you know, he starts making like funny jokes, or, you know, tries to impress her or whatever. And it's interesting because like that's right there within the definition itself, right? So this is what happened, because I had never, like I said, it was like scales just falling off my eyes, where I noticed her in a certain light. And what I noticed about her was the same thing that Boaz noticed about Ruth. Ruth was a hard worker. She was diligent in everything that she was doing, right? And what I noticed about her is, as I was doing her actual credit application, she, you know, gave me, told me where she worked, and then I thought she was done, and then all of a sudden she told me about a second job. So the first thing I noticed about her was that she was diligent in her work, you know, and that she was a hard worker, you know, and like I said, that's when I began to notice her. And I had that like Paul-like experience where the scales just fell off my eyes. All right. So next, so the bride is bought at a price. Okay. Boaz bought the field of Naomi because Ruth came along with that field. In the 4th chapter of Ruth, this is recorded. It says, he then said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the fields of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. And I thought that I should disclose to you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you do redeem it, redeem it. But if you do not redeem it, inform me, so that I know. For there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you, he said. And he said, I redeem it. So the Redeemer said, I redeem it. So basically Boaz is saying like, hey, let me know if you're going to buy that field, it's fine because it's rightfully yours to purchase. But if you're not, let me know, because I'm next in line and I want to buy it, right? And then in verse 5 he says, and on the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you shall acquire also Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead on his inheritance. Now what ends up happening is that the Redeemer finds this out, and they make an oath and a promise to one another with witnesses, and the Redeemer actually allows Boaz to purchase it. Okay? Just like, so let's talk about these verses here. So we have Ruth that I just read. We have John 3:16. We have Matthew 13:44 through 46. 1 Corinthians 6, 19 through 20, Romans 12, 1 and 2. How does this all tie together, right? Well, John 3:16, we all know this. This is what we, all pretty much grew up with, was, for Elohim so loved the world that he gave his only brought forth son, so that everyone who believes in him should not perish but possess everlasting life. But I love how Matthew touches on this if you go and listen to the teaching on the Hebraic epistle of 1 John, the intro, I believe, is where it's at. He talks about how Elohim didn't really love the world in its entirety the way that Christianity portrays it, but that because the bride is within the field of the world, that's why he purchased the world. And this is why Boaz purchased the field, because with the rights of the field comes who? Ruth, who is what he really wanted. Make sense? And then it says in the parable of the hidden treasure, this is also given. In Matthew 13:44, again, the reign of the heavens is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man having found it, hid it, and for joy over it, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. And then in the parable of the pearl of great price, in the next two verses, again, the reign of heavens is like a man, a merchant, seeking fine pearls, who, when he found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it. So this is what happened with Boaz and Ruth. Ruth was deeply desired by Boaz, and he went to great lengths to have the rights to her. Not to hold her as property, but to purchase her, to redeem her, is what he did. All right? So the bride is bought at a price. The purchase bought. We are not our own. Boaz buys Elimelech's field because Ruth comes with it, like I said. So the word bought in Hebrew is kana, H7069. It means to purchase. Purchase, redeem. Redeem. So, of course, this is, the engagement ring that I bought for her. And it actually took me 4 times going to this store to pick out just the stone itself, because I actually had it custom made just for her, because I felt that she was custom made just for me, right? So let's talk about the whole my body, my choice thing. It doesn't exist, because in 1 Corinthians 6, the Apostle Paul tells us, and he warns the Corinthians, those at Corinth, he talks about, don't do all these things. Don't do sexual immorality. Don't sacrifice to idols. Don't do all this witchcraft and all the other stuff that he talks about earlier in chapter 6. And then he says in verse 19, or do you not know that your body is the dwelling place of the set apart spirit who is in you, which you have from Elohim, and you are not your own? For you were bought with a price. Therefore, esteem Elohim in your body and in your spirit, which are of Elohim. And there's a footnote here that I'll give you from 1 Corinthians 7, verse 23, and 1 Peter 1, verse 18 through 19. But what was the price that was paid? See, Boaz, he paid the price of buying the field, right? Yahweh so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son, that whoever's to believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life, right? But he buys the field because his bride is buried within the field. And he sent his son. We were bought with the highest of price. His blood is what bought us. His precious blood. And when we sin purposely, we are trampling on that blood. Hebrews 10:26 warns us of that, right? And then further, Paul tells us in Romans 12, verse 1 and 2, that we should be a living sacrifice. See, it's not the blood of bulls and goats that Yahweh is after, but it's the altar of our hearts that he wants to sit upon. He wants us to be set ablaze for him. as a living sacrifice, a living offering. I call upon you, therefore, brothers, through the compassion of Elohim, to present your bodies a living offering, set apart, well-pleasing to Elohim, your reasonable worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you prove what is that good and well-pleasing and perfect desire of Elohim. Hallelujah. That's what it's all about. Let's move on. The engagement, the betrothal. So we know that this is represented in Shavuot. We know that 2 times that the children of Israel said the words, all that you have said we will do. All that Yahweh has said we will do. They did it in Exodus 19. And then after he gave them the covenant, and he laid out the terms and conditions, if you will, of, hey, this is what it is to follow me. This is what it means to be my Kodashim, my set-apart ones. Is in Exodus 24:3, they said, all the words which Yahweh has spoken, we shall do. So we know that, Brother Matthew's laid it out for us very clear that in order for a covenant to be ratified, it has to have a proposal, it has to have an acceptance, has to have a blood sacrifice, blood ratification, and a covenant confirming meal. These are all representations of the marriage, of the process of becoming married. So of course you have the proposal, you have the acceptance. Will you marry me? That's what Yahweh asked. That's what Yahweh asked Israel. Will you marry me? Will you enter into covenant with me? They said, yes, all the words which Yahweh has spoken we shall do. She said yes. This is what it's about. In Jeremiah 2:2 and 3, it says, go, and you shall cry in the hearing of Yerushalayim, saying, thus said Yahweh, I remember you, the kindness of your youth, the love of your bridehood, when you went after me in the wilderness, in a land that was not sown. Israel was set apart to Yahweh, the first fruits of his increase. All who ate of it became guilty. Evil came upon them, declares Yahweh. This is why he warns the church of Ephesus in Revelation chapter 2 that they've forgotten their first love. He's like, you do all these things. You identify those who say they are Jews and are not, but of the synagogue of Satan. You identify false emissaries and everything else. But this is what I hold against you. You have forgotten your first love. Because that's what he wants. He says in Joel chapter 2, he says, yet even now, turn to me with all of your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with prayer, and rend your heart and not your garments. And see, that's what Yom Kippur is about. It's about the self-affliction of our soul, about opening ourselves up and, like Brother Jose said before we started, recentering ourselves upon him, our focus upon him, making it all about him. You think about that song, The Heart of Worship by Matt Redman. I'm coming back to the heart of worship. It's all about you. It's all about you, Yahusha. I'm sorry for the things that I've made it, for it's all about you. That's what this is all about. It's about love. It's not about sacrifice. So, of course, we know in Matthew chapter 1, verse 18, that Miriam was engaged to Joseph. Betrothal and marriage are separate events. The families of a bride and bridegroom would meet together, and the groom would give the bride a gold ring or some other article of value, a token. A token. That token that we received, I don't have this in my notes, but the token that we received was the Ruach HaKodesh. That's why Yahusha said, it's better that I go away, for if I go, I will go to the Father and he will send the Ruach HaKodesh. That is the deposit. That is the down payment of what he did for us. And that he is coming back for us to redeem us to himself. Hallelujah. So it says in Matthew chapter 1, verse 18, but the birth of Yahusha, Messiah, was as follows. After his mother Miriam was engaged to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be pregnant from the set-apart spirit. And Joseph, her husband, being righteous, not wishing to make a show of her, had in mind to put her away secretly. But while he thought about this, a messenger of Yahweh appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Miriam as your wife, for that which is in her was brought forth by the set-apart spirit. And she shall give birth to a son, and you shall call his name Yahusha, for he shall save his people from their sins. Right? So let's talk about the betrothal for a second. So the difference between a promise and a betrothal, a promise of a marriage among the Jews of the Bible times might mean an engagement without anything definite. There could be a number of engagements broken off. It was the betrothal that was binding. Rather than a mere promise of marriage, the promise might be set aside, but a betrothal entered into was considered as final. The betrothal, a covenant. Among the ancient Hebrews, the betrothal was a spoken covenant. Ezekiel tells us in the 16th chapter, it pictures Yahweh marrying Jerusalem, and the following words are used of her. I swear unto thee, and entered into a covenant with thee, saith Yahweh Sabaoth, and you became mine. Ezekiel 16:8. After the exile, the betrothal included signing a written document of marriage. The ceremony of betrothal, a Jewish betrothal in Mashiach's time, was conducted like this. The families of the bride and groom would meet with some others present to serve as witnesses. The young man would give the young woman either a gold ring or some article of value, or simply a document in which he promised to marry her. Then he would say to her, see, by this ring or this token, you are set apart for me, according to the law of Moses in Israel. The difference between a betrothal and a marriage was the betrothal was not the same as the wedding. At least a whole year elapsed between the betrothal and the actual wedding. These two events must not be confused. The Torah said, what man is there that hath betrothed a wife and not taken her? Deuteronomy 20, verse 7. The two events are differentiated here, betrothing a wife and taking a wife, i.e. in actual marriage. It was during this period of about a year between the betrothal and the wedding that Mary was found to be with child of the Ruach HaKodesh, the set-apart spirit, Matthew chapter 7, verse 18. And that's, I can post the link to this, but it's from a Bible history website. Okay, that wasn't my own. All right. But let's talk about Ruth and Boaz for a second, because I might blow your mind if you don't know this. But so Matthew chapter 1 gives us the genealogy. So it says, and Salmon brought forth Boaz by Rahab. Rahab was the harlot who hid and sheltered Joshua and Caleb when they went to spy out Jericho before Israel seized Jericho and the walls of Jericho fell. So Rahab was the one that put that scarlet thread over her doorway, over her doorpost, which represented the blood of Yahusha, right? Now Boaz brought forth Obed by Ruth. So this very thing of where Ruth the Moabite is grafted in right here. It's a beautiful picture that Romans 11 talks about. And Obed brought forth Jesse. Now who's Jesse? Jesse brought forth David, the king, King David. And King David brought forth Solomon by Uriah's wife, by Bathsheba. That's what we're talking about here. And then later on in verse 16, and Yahushua brought forth Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Yahusha was born, who is called Mashiach. So all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations, and from David unto exile in Babylon were 14 generations, and from exile to Babylon, or from exile in Babylon until Mashiach were 14 generations. Fascinating stuff here. All right. So the wedding day, Yom Kippur, it's about love. It's not about sacrifice, right? So let's talk about her preparation. The bride makes herself ready. Matthew 22 verse 4 said, again, he sent out other servants saying, say to those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fatted calf are slaughtered, and all is ready. Come to the wedding feast. And in Matthew chapter 25, verse 10, and they, speaking of the wise and the foolish virgins, of course. This verse 10 is about the foolish virgins. And while they went to buy, the foolish virgins, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. In Revelation 19, verse 7 and 8, let us be glad and rejoice and give him praise, for the marriage supper of the Lamb has come, and his wife has prepared herself, or made herself ready. And to her it was given to be dressed in fine linen, clean and bright, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the set apart ones. So preparation, established, kun, prepare yourself, be ready. You know, Matthew just touched on this, and also the two or 3 weeks ago in the Torah portion, it talked about natsab, standing ones. The standing ones on the sea of glass that are mentioned in Revelation 7, Revelation 14, and also in Revelation 15 too. This is what it's talking about, the overcomers. Those who are ready to sacrifice, if it comes to it, sacrifice themselves for the one who gave himself for them. Those are the ones who are going to be standing. So let's keep looking. So he goes to prepare a place for her. For the bridegroom, there is preparation involved. During the engagement process, he must start getting things in order and making his place ready for his bride. The engagement process is like the sanctification process. Just as you go from thinking the way that you thought before you met Mashiach, you do the same. You go from thinking as a single individual to thinking now as one husband and wife. I set this up the day, this was like 2 days after we got married, after we came back from our honeymoon. My wife was out running errands, and I wanted to move our bed into our new bedroom so that where I am, she may be also. John 14, 1-3 says thus, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in Elohim, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many staying places, and if not, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I shall come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, you might be too. This is what it's about. He has gone to prepare a place for us. And that's what I was talking about, the deposit that he's given us, the token that he's given us. All right? So now we see dimly. So no matter how many visions I had, I could never see her clearly until the 44 days had elapsed from when I wrote that beginning part of this to when she was fully revealed to me. So the picture on the left here is a pre-ceremony prayer with her. I could picture in my mind, but I could not fully see. And again, I remind of 1 Corinthians 12. It says, for now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. For now I know in part, but then I shall know just as also I am known. But it is written, eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor have it entered in the heart of a man the things which Yahweh has prepared for those who love him. So dim, the Hebrew word for dim is kaheh, feeble, obscure, somewhat dark, or kadah, a puzzle, hard question, proverb, riddle. But let's talk about the reaction. Now, I had no idea how I would react when I saw her. As large and as emotional as my reaction was, it is nothing compared to how both Yahusha and I will feel towards one another on that day of his return. when he's no longer just with me by his Ruach HaKodesh, but I can see him face to face. I can hear his audible voice speak to me instead of feeling an impartation rising up inside of me from my spirit. As grand as this day was, that glorious day is what Stephanie and I are truly living for. Now, we actually sang to one another as she came down the aisle. We actually sang to one another the song From This Moment On, which is what, making a vow is all about. But I can only imagine. Now, I'm not going to sing it for you, but I'm going to read some of the lyrics. So as the song says, we can only imagine what it will be like when I walk by your side. I can only imagine what my eyes will see when your face is before me. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance before you, Yahusha, or in awe of you? Be still. Will I stand in your presence, or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah, or will I be able to speak it all? I can only imagine. Now, what's interesting is Jose brought this up before we started. Revelation chapter 1, verse 7, 117, but first verse 7. See, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye shall see him, even they who pierced him, and all the tribes of the earth shall mourn because of him. Yes, amen. That's from Zechariah 14. It refers back to that, those who pierced him. In Matthew 24, 29 through 31, it says, and immediately after the distress, after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give its light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then the sign of the Son of Man shall appear in the heaven. Shall appear in the heaven. And then all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his messengers with a great sound of a trumpet, that they shall gather together his chosen, the elect from the four winds, ones from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. In Revelation 1, 17 and 18, this is what John saw. And when I, this is John speaking, saw him, I fell at his feet as dead. And he placed his right hand on me and saying, do not be afraid. I am the first and the last and the living one. I became dead, and see, I am living forevermore. Amen. And I possess the keys of the grave and death. Hallelujah. That's the King of Kings that we serve. So the vow, count the cost from this moment on. If you read in Luke chapter 14, it gives us the warning about not counting the cost before we decide to follow him. It says, and whoever does not bear his stake and come after me is unable to be my top one. See, Christianity teaches us, Romans 10:9, that if you confess with your mouth the Master Yahusha and believe in your heart that Elohim raised him from the dead, you will be saved. But that's really all it teaches us. It doesn't teach us to obey his commandments. He said in John chapter 15, if you love me, obey my commandments, right? And also, we can't be double-minded. Luke 9:62, this is right after Yahusha tells a man, this guy says, okay, let me bury my father real quick, and then I'll come and follow after you. And Yahusha said, let the dead bury their dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of Elohim. And Yahusha said to him, Yahusha said to him, no one having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the reign of Elohim. And it references back to Luke chapter 14, verse 26, also to John chapter 12, verse 24 through 26. And when you make a vow to Yahweh or swear an oath to bind himself by some agreement, he does not break his word. He does according to all that comes out of his mouth. And the word for vow is nadar, to promise, to do or to give something to Yah. See, when we are at the altar like this, and we make the vow like Brother Don and Sister Donna did yesterday at their beautiful wedding ceremony. See, as a husband, when he entrusts us with one of his daughters, we're saying to him, Yes, Yahweh, I will take care of your daughter. I will love her. I will cherish her until death do us part. That's what it's about, right? So moving on here. With the washing of the water of his word. So John chapter 13, 5 through 15 says, and after that he put into a basin and began to wash the feet of the taught ones, to wipe them with a towel which he was girded. And so he came to Simon Peter and said to him, Master, and Simon said to him, Master, do you wash my feet? Yahushua answered and said to him, you do not know what I am doing now, but you shall know after this. And Peter said to him, by no means shall you wash my feet ever. Yahushua answered him and said, if I do not wash you, you have no part with me. So instead of us doing the whole worldly garter toss thing, I decided to wash her feet. And I didn't know it then. I learned this later on, but I was actually doing this. By washing her, she now has a part with me, just as the disciples had a part with Yahushua. Because in verse 9, Simon Peter says, and he said to him, Master, not only my feet, but also my hands and my head. And Yahushua said to him, he who has had a bath does not need to wash except his feet, but is clean altogether. And you are clean, but not all of you. For he knew who would deliver him up. So he said, you are not all clean. Speaking of Judas, of course. So when he had washed their feet and taken his garments and sat down again, he said to them, do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and master, and you say, well, for I am. Then if I, master and teacher, have washed your feet, you also to wash one another's feet, which we did at Passover this year, right? For I gave you an example that you should do as I have done to you. And then Ephesians chapter 5, 25 through 33 says thus, husbands, love your wives as Mashiach also did love the assembly and gave himself for it in order to set it apart and cleanse it with the washing of the water by the word, which is a reference to Revelation 19, verse 8 and 9. Verse 27 says, in order to present it to himself, a splendid assembly, not having spot or wrinkle or any sort of this, or any of this sort, but that it might be set apart, Kodesh and blameless. In this way, husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but feeds it and cherishes it. And also the master does the assembly, because we are members of his body and of his flesh and of his bones. Verse 31 says, for this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined or cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This secret is great, but I speak concerning Messiah in the assembly. However, you too, everyone, let each one love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she fears or reveres her husband. So I have a question for you. Have you let him wash over you with the water of his word? Have you let the truth of his word wash over you? See, sometimes I'll just sit here and I'll listen to worship music, and I'll find this stuff from what I used to listen to at IHOP, International House of Prayer. And it's called Worship with the Word. It's prophetic worship. And it literally lets the word wash over you to music. Because when this happens, see, as a husband, sometimes I have to come along and, the enemy will come and try and enter into Stephanie's mind with a negative thought that she's not beautiful, or she's not lovely, or that she's this, or that she's that, or she should do this, or maybe it's something that I did, in the days prior where I acted out of the flesh or out of anger or whatever, and I have to come and I have to wash that away with the truth of his word, right? That's what it's about. And washing or wash is rakatz, primitive root to lave, the whole part of a being to bathe self, to wash, or lutron. a bath, i.e. figuratively baptism, washing. This is what it's about. Now, this is a big part right here, okay, and I'm almost wrapped up. Because there's a name change. See, Stephanie, her name used to be Addison, right? And then in a moment, it became much more. There's a name change, right? Now, I didn't go into what Addison meant or what much more means or anything like that, but the point is that we have a name change. See, when we have that Brit Milah, that circumcision of the heart that Matthew talks about, and we have that regeneration of our spirit, we actually come alive. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says we become a new creation in Yahushua HaMashiach. We have this experience, we have this name change. We are no longer called Shemama, which is devastation, figuratively astonishment, desolate, wasted, right? But we become Hefzibah. And that means my delight is in her. It's a fanciful name for Palestine. This is from Isaiah 62, verse 4 and 5. No longer you are called forsaken or Shemama, and no longer is your land called deserted, but you shall be called Hefzibah, and your land married. For Yahweh shall delight in you, and your land be married. For as a young man marries a maiden, so shall your sons marry you. And as a bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your Elohim rejoice over you. So I'm here to tell you today, I don't know who needs to hear this, whether you're in this meeting now or whether you're watching this in the future on YouTube, but I'm here to tell you that there's a creator who loves you so much, and he delights in you. And even in your weakness, he has called you lovely. He has called you lovely, even in your moments of weakness. He delights in you. He even says in another part of Isaiah that, come, let us reason together. For though your sin shall be like scarlet, I shall make you as white as snow. Go and look that up. You need to have these words of affirmation to go and read upon. You are precious to him. You are the buried treasure that was in the field of the world, which is why he sent his son to come and purchase the world and redeem it. Not because he loves the wicked of the world, but because he loves you. Because you are his bride. You are his exceedingly great reward. You are his possession. You are his inheritance. It says, I don't even know where it's at, but it says, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the tree. You are the joy that was set before him. You are what he was gazing at what he was thinking about, what he was pondering as he was up there giving his last breath. And this is what Ephesians 5 is talking about. It speaks of this great mystery between the marriage of a man and a woman and the assembly and the Mashiach. So ask yourself, if a mere man can rejoice this much as I rejoiced over my bride, how much more does Yahweh delight and rejoice over you? That's what I want you to ask yourself, because that's what Yom Kippur is about. So lastly, let's talk about the marriage supper, and I'll wrap up. So the marriage supper. So Yahusha's been planning our wedding since the very foundation of the earth was laid. He's been in wedding planning mode for thousands of years. Now, when I wrote this, we had 2 days at the time to make ourselves ready for our wedding. Well, obviously, we planned our wedding, over months and everything. But at this time, we had 2 more days until it was time. So we had 2 more days to make ourselves ready for our wedding, but our wedding day, as wonderful and as beautiful as it will be, will pale in comparison to that day. Just as a husband wants a loyal bride who has been faithful to him, Yahusha wants the same from his bride. There are 2 women described in the book of Revelation. There's the harlot Babylon, and there's the bride. The trial, the testing of the tribulation will determine which one we are a part of, or what we choose to be a part of. The refiner's fire is what will happen. This is what it's about. So Genesis 2:23 said, and the man said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one is called woman, because she was taken out of man. For this reason, for this cause, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And it says in verse 25, and they were both naked, and the man and his wife, yet they were not ashamed. See, what I want to teach you is that, intimacy, whether it be, no man can teach another man how to be intimate with his wife, and no woman can teach a woman how to be intimate with her husband. But I also can't teach you how to be intimate with the Ruach HaKodesh. Intimacy isn't something that can be taught. It's only experienced. It's only experienced by allowing yourself to be vulnerable in his presence. First of all, you have to make time for him. You have to set apart time for him. That's what the feasts are about. That's what Shabbat is about as well, right? But the intimacy here, it's not about, so when we focus on verse 25, it says they were both naked, the man and his wife, yet they were not ashamed. But it's not just, we focus on the physical. We think like, oh, they were literally, physically naked, which, yeah, they were. But that's not what it's only referring to here. It's talking about the intimacy. They were uncovered to one another. They were fully exposed to one another, meaning they held nothing back from one another. They were open and honest in all of their ways. They didn't hold any secrets from one another, is what it's about. That's true intimacy. See, it's not the physical manifestation in the bedroom. It's the pillow talk. It's the moments where you're hanging out with her and you're speaking forth your heart to her, and she's speaking forth her heart to you, and vice versa, and you're having these conversations. That's what it's like with Mashiach as well. That's what it's like. Proverbs 30, verse 18 and 19 says, there are three matters are too marvelous for me, and four which I do not understand. The way of an eagle in the heavens, the way of a snake on a rock, the way of a ship in the heart of the sea, and the way of a man with a girl or with a maiden. That's what I'm talking about. It's undescribable. Nobody can teach you what intimacy is or how to do it. But Revelation 21, verse 2 through 3, and then verse 9 says, and I, Yohanan, saw the set-apart city, renewed Yerushalayim, coming down out of the heaven from Elohim, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a voice from the heavens saying, see, the booth of Elohim is with men. He shall dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and Elohim shall be with them and be their Elohim. And verse 9 says, and one of the seven messengers who held the seven bowls filled with the seven last plagues came to me and spoke to me, saying, come, I shall show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. So real quick, I'm going to play just a couple of videos and then I'll be done here. There's my warning right there. See, the shofar is blasting.
Wake up the saints, let every nation shout of your fame. Yahusha is coming soon. change. Ready for you, every heart longing for our King. We sing, even so come, Yahushua come. Even so come, Yahushua.
Is coming soon.
Like a bride waiting for her groom, we'll be changed, ready for you. Every heart longing for our King. We sing, even so come. Even so come, Yahushua come. So we wait for you. So we wait, you're coming soon. So we wait for you. Yeah, we wait, you're coming soon. Like a bride waiting for her groom, we'll be changed, ready for you. Every heart longing for our King. We say, like a bride waiting for her groom, we'll be changed, be ready for you. Every heart longing for our King. We sing, even so come, Yahushua come. Even so come, Yahushua come.
Now, this is something, just a short little excerpt, an exhortation of what our focus has to be on that we recorded on March 24th of this year, 2020, during another worship session.
If it does come to that, if it does come to going to prison and even unto death, you see, them actually ending our life actually cuts us free, actually sets us free from the bondage of this world, this sinful world that has nothing for me. And we're just passing through. We're just aliens just passing through. We're just aliens just passing through. This world is not for me. He said that this kingdom is not, this world is not of my kingdom. My kingdom is of another world. And I'm not worried about what is coming, what army is coming, what tanks are coming, what Humvees are coming. But I am focused on the fact that he is coming. He is breaking the seals right now. That's what has enraged Satan, to come and try and persecute the church, try and wear out the church, try and wear her out and chase her down and try and eliminate her. But he's plotted a vain thing with the kings of the earth against Yahweh and against his anointed. I'm here to tell you that it's a vain thing because it won't happen. It won't work. Though they slay me, though they throw me in prison, They can't take the hope that's inside of us. That's what it's all about. They can't take the joy. They can't take the peace, your shalom. They can't take his goodness away from you unless you let them. Because it's about authority, and he's given us authority over them. If it does.
Revelation 22:17 says, and the Spirit and the bride say, come. And he who hears, let him say, come. And he who thirsts, come. And he who desires it, take the water of life freely or without pain.
Excellent. Thank you, Brandon, for that. It was I was blessed to watch that again. Thank you, and listen to your wonderful testimony. How you didn't do it, you didn't get to this understanding by yourself. You know, it took the two of you to really make the connection with what Yahuwah is trying to instill in understanding of how the bride and the groom need to be in one accord. And I appreciate that again. We do have a few minutes before we go to the second presentation. So if anyone has any questions or comments, right now would be the best time. Jeannie, go ahead, sister.
Oh, isn't it just so beautiful? Just to see and understand the whole wedding process, and it was wonderful to walk through your wedding, Brandon. It's like we were there, and to see how, you know, when you follow those guidelines, I mean, it's right there how you can have this amazing partnership and wedding of being one in a cod. So that was awesome. I also have a book that went into some further detail of the traditions of what they did. And oh my gosh, it's mind-blowing. But one of the things is that they would, the parents way ahead of time would start orchestrating the wedding. But it always had to be the bride that made the final decision right up into the consummation. But what they would do, it's like this played out thing. They would, it would be told and hinted that they were going to be coming for the betrothal dinner, and they would go to the door, and both fathers would be present, and the father would look out at the peephole or whatever, the curtain, whatever, and then actually the bride had to open the door to the, and it goes along with Revelation 3:20, where it says, I stand at the door and knock, and whomever opens that door, I will come in and sup with them. So that's the beginning of this process. Yep. Of this wedding supper. And there's 4 cups of wine that's drunk. There's specific names. Of course, the last cup is reserved for the consummation. And as you know, with the Jewish weddings, after they both drank from the cup, then they put their foot on the cup. He put his foot on the cup with her foot on top, or either, I don't know, I don't remember if hers is on the cup and his foot on top or whatever, but they do it together with both feet together to crush the cup. Nobody else can drink from that cup, but then that was the solidification. And then there's so much more. And the wedding process too is he would wash her feet. He would take her old dirty sandals off and he would wash her feet. So you can see all that he did in that betrothal in the Pesach. It just makes your heart sing. And you think about his coming and that wedding feast, that nobody else can come to that supper table but his. So anyway, thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All praise to him.
Yes.
So some of this actually, just real quick. So the beginning part of it, like I said, was from about 44 days before we were married. But then as a memory, it would come up, it came up in 2018 on the same day on Facebook, and I added to it part 2 there. And then the next year I added to a part 3 there. So it was kind of that wheel within a wheel within a wheel where he kept giving me revelation and understanding and knowledge about, you know, what was happening, you know, and I was learning even from after being married, you know, for almost a year, and then, you know, almost the second year, the second time. So yeah, it's fascinating. I was just blown away. I really was. I was like, wow, like this is so good. So
The mystery is definitely unraveling.
yeah.
The layers.
Yeah.
So, Gene, you said the bride has the last word, eh? Am I correct?
Yes, she could back out right up to, which hence, I mean, I think that is where you would have to be at some point, I think, in scriptures where you blaspheme the spirit after you've been betrothed, because, you know, that once saved, always saved philosophy.
Yes. You remind me, you remind me of Isaac and Rebecca and Abraham.
Uh-huh.
Rebecca would not have go with Abraham's servant. If Rebecca had said no, then that's it. She had the final word to say yes or no to go with him to see Isaac. So that's true.
Free will choice, right? It's all about loving him, and that's what he wants. He doesn't want just an obedient robotic bride. He wants all of her whole heart.
Yeah. No, and I mean, maybe that's even about, you know, what the mark of the beast is about, because it's that final decision, right? You know, she can back out all the way up until that moment. But at that moment, you know, will she lay her life down for the one who laid his life down for her, or will she become the harlot? That's what I was referencing earlier when I said that the tribulation is actually going to determine what we are, or what, you know, which woman we're a part of, you know, whether we're the harlot. Because see, I made a vow, you know, to Stephanie, right? As you guys saw, but technically nothing has happened in our life to where there's been an outside temptation or an outside intruder or anything like that to where I've had to prove myself faithful to her. Because that's where you really determine, are you faithful? Well, if you're never tried, you're never tested, you're never tempted, how do you even know if you're going to be faithful? The tribulation is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And we find out, you know, what we really are, what we're really made of, how real, how deep our love is for our King. So
that's a good point, Brandon. And I appreciate you bringing that out, because we can say a lot of things, but will we do?
Exactly.
And we're admonished to be doers of the word and not just hearers. So it's relatively easy to say what we would do, but when we're tested, then we'll know, are we true or not?
Yep.
And I'm glad you brought that point out. I enjoyed your story, well, your revealing of your wedding and comparing it to the bride of the Messiah. That was very, very interesting and insightful. And I really enjoyed it. So thank you, and thanks, Stephanie, for sharing that.
Oh, she didn't
May
know.
have to use some of those tips when I get married. So I'm going to keep that in mind.
There you go. Oh yeah, she didn't know. See, the only time I keep secrets from her, or have kept secrets from her, are when I'm doing mischievous stuff like this.
Don't call it mischievous. Just say,
whatever.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All the surprises, surprise.
Yeah,
I always like to say
surprise.
he's in trouble with me, because I know, I just have that intuition that he's up to something. I just know. And so, but that was very beautiful. Thank you so much. That touched my heart. And what a great representation of Yom Kippur, fitting for a time as this. So it was just very beautiful. Thank you so much.
And actually, I think this is the first time I've ever heard Yom Kippur atonement related to a marriage. Of all the years, I don't think I've ever heard it related to a marriage. So that was, you know, that's been a true blessing for me. Thank you.
Well, I have to give credit where it's due. I mean, Sister Tamara, gave me some insights, as well as Sister Jeannie. They touched on it in the sisters gathering a couple of weeks ago, and Tamara told me to watch that, as well. And, and I think that's why, because like it is Judgment Day, right? That's why Joel refers to the day of Yahweh as great and terrible. Because it's great for his bride, because his bride's being redeemed, his bride's being rescued from the grips of the enemy, but it's terrible for those who are against him. Because just like if someone was to ever try to harm Stephanie, the gates of hell would be unreached against them, from being like in wrath.
Right.
And that's exactly what it is. So it is the day of judgment, but it's also the day when he comes and whisks his bride away.
Wow.
Says, rise up, my love, my fair one, come away with me.
Wow.
So that's
Beautiful. Beautiful story.
Stephanie was glowing, by the way. Stephanie, you were glowing.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that was great.
That was the Ruach, wasn't it, Stephanie?
Yes, ma'am.
Amen. Amen.
Well, it was nice to have got a double portion yesterday. Your wedding and also Dawn and Donna's, and that was
yeah.
that was good. So I think we're getting more and more aligned with this word, and we do what we can to do things as he does things, right?
Yeah. And next week, we're going to get more into, like I put in the description this week, but Yahweh led me in a little bit different direction this week. But next week, we're going to get into what role does the bride play in this, and really like what are we supposed to be doing and everything like that. So that's kind of where we're going next week, just to give you a peek into next week. So
sounds good. Well, I appreciate everything you have shared with us today, and make those wonderful and loving connections that we can a lot of us can assimilate or can at least associate with, for sure. All right, so appreciate it, Brandon. We're going to go ahead and just